Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel and Mirz Hashem. Today we will be learning Daf Tzadik Tes Amid Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on the very bottom line of the Shulchan Aruch on Tzadik Ches Amid Beis, Siman Shin Vav in the middle of Sif Vav. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanesunim Batzara Ubashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Mayom Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakem Yirachem Alehem, V'yaitzia mitzara l'rvacha me'afela la'oira mishibud l'geula hashta b'agolo v'zman kariv and emar amen. Our learning should be a schus refuah shalema from Shemer ben Esther Fradel Yitzchak ben Tzion ben Dusha Devara bas Shashabina Rivka bas Shiraleh and Chava Hadassah bas Serel. Our learning should also be a schus for Yonasan ben Michal and Yoel ben Michal. The Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over them together with all of our other brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way. So, we're continuing to learn Siman Shin Vav here, and we've been discussing the Isser on Shabbos of Mimtzoi Cheftzecha V'daber Davar. Mimtzoi Cheftzecha, to pursue your own weekday pursuits, to be involved in things that are not Shabbos activities, to be involved in things that are essentially weekday activities, even if they have nothing to do with real, even if you're not performing, not they have nothing to do with, even if you're not performing any kind of malacha. So for example, to go out to your field and take a look, what should I plow on Sunday, what should I plow on Monday, to walk around your rental apartment and see, okay, this should be painted, this should be updated, that's Mimtzoi Cheftzecha. You're involving yourself in your own weekday pursuits. So you're looking into things that are involved in malacha that would be asur on Shabbos. So to daber davar, you don't discuss things that have to do with malacha that would be asur on Shabbos. So you don't discuss on Shabbos doing something that would be asur to do on Shabbos. So I remember when my kids were little, sometimes on Shabbos afternoon, they would want to talk to me about driving somewhere after Shabbos or doing some kind of thing on Motzei Shabbos that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. Say, not on Shabbos. We don't talk about it on Shabbos. That's the Isser of Daber Davar. Having said that, what we've seen is that we darshan from the pasuk Mimtzoi Cheftzecha. What's asur is pursuing your own pursuits, and daber davar, it's asur to discuss something that would be asur to do on Shabbos if it is cheftzecha, if it's something that's for your own purposes. Aval cheftze shamayim, but if it's something which is required for a dvar mitzvah, that would be mutter. And that's what the Mechaber said over here in the beginning of Sif Vav. The Mechaber said, 2 lines off the bottom, Cheftze shamayim mutter l'daber b'hem. You're allowed to discuss things on Shabbos, even if they're discussions that involve malacha that would be asur on Shabbos. You're allowed to discuss them if they're Cheftze shamayim. Kegoin cheshbonos shal mitzvah. You're allowed to make all sorts of calculations for things that have to do with a mitzvah. If like tzedakah, you're allowed to pledge money to tzedakah, even though you wouldn't be allowed to actually give money to tzedakah. And now, continues the Mechaber says, Ulefakeach al iskei rabim. You're allowed to look into the needs of the tzibur. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ulefakeach al iskei rabim. What does this mean? La'ayin v'lachkar, to look into and investigate what are things that need to be done for the public, for the tzibur, even if there are things that involve isurei malacha. Did tzarchei rabim hevi kitzarch mitzvah, because tzarchei rabim are tzarchei mitzvah. So if you're together in the shul with the board members of the shul, and there's tzarchei rabim, things that the shul needs, maybe replacing an air conditioner unit, sounds like you would be allowed to discuss that on Shabbos, because that's tzarchei rabim. Even though to go home and have a conversation with your wife about whether you should replace the dishwasher or you should replace the air conditioning unit, that would be mutter. That's not That's definitely mimtzoi cheftzecha v'daber davar. That is not Shabbos appropriate at all. But if it's tzarchei rabim, now it becomes cheftzei shamayim, it's a dvar mitzvah, and it's mutter. Mishnah Berurah says even another chiddush, mutter afilu leilech lebate tartiyois, shemiskansin sham ha'enam Yehudim, k'dei lefakech b'shvil harabim. You would even be allowed to go down to town hall. You could go down to Borough Hall if there's a meeting of the community board, or there's a meeting of the government, the municipality, and you have to go down there to discuss things that are necessary for the rabbim. You would be allowed to do that. The Kasra Paiskim, however, the Paiskim write, we're not being matir over here, amira la'akum on a daraisa. We're not saying that you're allowed to go tell an Eina Yehudi to perform an Issa Daraisa on behalf of the Tzibur. V'loy shvus acher, nor are we going to be matir a different derabanan. In other words, over here we are being matir you mimtzah cheftzecha v'daber davar, to go discuss things that involve malacha litzarchei shamayim. That we're being matir. But we're not being matir amira la'akum, not on an issa daraisa, that's what he means, lasais malacha, and not on an issa darabanan, v'loy shvos acher b'shvil iskei rabim. So don't get confused. Just because we're being matir over here, mimtzah cheftzecha v'daber davar, on behalf of the rabbim, we're not being matir amira la'akum, not on a daraisa and not on a darabanan, even if it's for tzarchei rabim. Deraka pikuach v'hisaskus b'dvarim b'loy malacha. It's only the looking into it and the being busy with discussions where you're not at, where no one's doing malacha, not you and not an Eina Yehudi. The aser b'tzarchei yachid b'shom v'daber davar, which is something that would be aser if it's for a yachid. Like I said, it would be aser to discuss in your home with your wife whether or not you should replace the air conditioning unit. That would be also because of mimtzah cheftzecha v'daber davar, zeh hutter l'dvar mitzvah oy l'tzarech rabim. But in the case of a dvar mitzvah, we're being matir mimtzah cheftzecha v'daber davar. We're being matir the discussion and the looking into it, if it's for a dvar mitzvah or it's for a tzarech rabim. But we're not being matir amira la'akum to actually have a malacha be accomplished through the agency of an Eina Yehudi. Not if it's a malacha daraisa, and not even if it's only a malacha darabanan. That we're not being matir. V'ayla kamam is siman shin zayin sifhei, but the Mishnah Berurah says, you should take a look weiter in shin zayin sifhei. We'll get there soon. Mirz Hashem, Bez Hashem Yisparach. Ula eil b'siman reish ayin vav sif beis, and take a look earlier what we learned already in siman reish ayin vav sif beis b'hagah, in the words of the Ramah. So in Shin Zayin Sifhei, the Mechaber is going to say that Amir La'akum on an Issa D'Rabbanan is mutter if it's a Makam Mitzvah or a Makam Tzarech Harbe. So the Mechaber is going to write that Amir La'akum on a D'Rabbanan b'Makam Mitzvah, or Amir La'akum on a D'Rabbanan if it's a tzorech harbe, if it's a very strong need, the Mechaber is going to be matir. The Ramah over there is going to say, yesh matirin afilu b'daraisa. There are those that are matir amir la'akum even on a malacha daraisa, if it's b'makam mitzvah or it's b'makam tzarech harbe. Now, having said that, the Mishnah Berurah also tells us to take a look at Reish Ayin Vav, in the words of the Ramah. Now, if you go back to Reish Ayin Vav, Sif Beis, to the Ramah, you'll see that the Ramah over there brings down this shita that's matir amir la'akum on a daraisa b'makam mitzvah, and he says that you should be machmir unless it's a tzarech gadol, unless it's a real tzarech gadol, because otherwise, he says, there are many shitas who disagree with that opinion and say that amir la'akum on a daraisa is not going to be mutter. The Ramah does seem to lean towards paskening that amir la'akum b'makam mitzvah is mutter, and we'll discuss that in greater detail when we go into Siman Shin Zayin Mirz Hashem. Okay, continuing in the Mechaber, says the Mechaber here on the bottom line, Uleshadech hatinoik le'ores. Another thing that's mutter that could have been aser under the rubric of mimtzai chefzecha v'daber davar is to make a shidduch. Now, literally, the words over here mean uleshadei chatinoik leares, to arrange the erison, the kedushin, of a young child. Now, a tinoik is a male child. Says the Mishnah Berurah Chavdes uleshadei chatinoik tzarich loymar hatinoikes. It should say a female child. Now, that's actually, there's a lot here that's unwritten. Because, first of all, what's the difference if it says tinoik or tinoikis? If you're going to arrange the shidduch for a tinoikis, for a young girl, you're also going to be arranging the shidduch of a tinoik, right? Because every shidduch is going to involve one boy and one girl. So what's the difference if we focus on the boy or we focus on the girl, right? The Mechaber is focusing on the boy. Or l'shadach atinoik. Comes along the Mishnah Berurah, comes along the Chavetz Chaim, and he says, no, not tinoik, tinoikes. Now, he's not saying this on his own. He's bringing down the Gemara in Shabbos on Kuf Nun Amud Aleph. Now, in the Gemara in Kuf Nun Amud Aleph, I seem to remember that there's a question whether it says tinoikes, a young girl, or it says tinoikos, young children, which would be boy and girl. But in any case, obviously the Chavetz Chaim is making a point over here, right? Chavetz Chaim, I don't think it's just he wants to, be 100% faithful to the text of the Gemara in Kuf Nun Amud Aleph. He seems to be adding something over here. He says it's the tinoikes. Now, let's take a step back a second. Everything that we're discussing over here in Sivav, what's the point of Sivav? The point of Sivav is we're learning about the Isser of Mimtzai Chefzecha v'Daber Davar. So we're telling you that there are things that you're not allowed to pursue on Shabbos. You're not allowed to go around and see what needs painting on Shabbos. You're not doing any malacha. No, but that's Mimtzai Chefzecha. You're engaged in and you're pursuing your own pursuits. What does that mean, your own pursuits? Your own things that are not Shabbosdik, that have nothing to do with Shabbos. They're weekday activities. They even involve Isurei Malacha, right? Painting would be an Issa Malacha. Plowing your field is an Issa Daraisa. You would think, what's wrong with going down to my field and discussing or looking into what needs plowing? What am I doing wrong? I'm not doing anything wrong. No, you are. That's Mimtzai Chefzecha. And to discuss it would be Daber Davar. Comes along the Mechaber in Sivav and says you should know it's only Mimtzai Chefzecha. It's only if it's your pursuits. But Chafetzei Shamayim are mutter. So obviously what we're being matir things that otherwise would be aser. Now let's just talk about l'shadei chatinoik or a tinoikis. Why would that be aser? Why can't you sit around your Shabbos table and start suggesting shidduchim on Shabbos? I think Pliny's son would be perfect for Pliny's daughter. What aspect of malacha is involved in that? Why is that? Why would that be aser under the rubric of mimtzai chefzecha v'daber davar? Why is this? You want to tell me that you don't sit around and talk about recipes, about baking a cake? I understand why that's mimtzai chefzecha v'daber davar. You're not allowed to bake cake on Shabbos, so don't discuss baking cake on Shabbos. But why can't you make shidduchim on Shabbos? What would possibly be wrong with making shidduchim on Shabbos? This was puzzling me until I saw this Mishnah Berurah. When the Mishnah Berurah says tzarich lamed tinoikes in halacha, when it comes to the question of making a match, there's a very big difference between a young girl and a young boy. And this also might be why the Mechaber specifically talks about tinoikes. Let me ask you something. When you talk to somebody about a shidduch, are you usually arranging the shidduch of a tinoik and a tinoikes? Are you usually like arranging the shidduch of a 6-year-old? No, you're arranging the shidduch of a 20-year-old girl and a 23-year-old boy. I don't want to run afoul of all the organizations that want the ages to go younger. I'm not making a political statement. So you're not discussing the shidduch of a tinoik, and you're not discussing the shidduch of a tinoikis. So why are we talking here about tinoik and tinoikis? Well, in halacha, there is one very unique concept of a tinoikis, and that is that a man, a father, is allowed to marry off his daughter, who's a ketana, without even consulting with her. A father could go ahead and accept money for kiddushin from a man and marry off his daughter, who's a ketana. Now, that would be also on Shabbos, because that's mamish mekach umemkar. That's like making a business transaction. The ketana daughter, the minor daughter, is under the reshus of the father. When he accepts the kedushin money, he's transferring the daughter from his reshus to the new husband's reshus. That would be also for mekach umemkar. Now you could understand why discussing the shidduch would be also because of mimtzai chefzecha v'daber davar. You're actually discussing a business transaction on Shabbos. Kamash Malon, it's mutter because it's cheftzei shamayim. That's why the Mishnah Berurah comes along and he says the heter over here is not by a tinoik. A father cannot marry off his minor son. He doesn't have that right. So that would never be a business transaction. The chiddush over here is a l'shadach hatinoikis liares. Even though the father has the right to perform a business transaction and marry off his minor daughter, but to discuss it on Shabbos would be mutter because it's cheftzei shamayim. That's the way I understand this. Okay, let's go right there over here. Top line, tzadik tes amud aleph. Another thing that would be mutter on Shabbos and is not also because of mitzvah chefzecha v'daber davar or lalamdoi sefer oy umnis. You could arrange for your child to be taught Torah or to be taught a trade. Now, the words literally mean you could teach him sefer, you could teach him Torah, oy umnis, or you could teach him a trade. It's not really what it means here. What it means is to arrange for him to be taught. What does that mean? It means to hire a malamed. You're allowed to discuss hiring a malamed on Shabbos, and you're allowed to discuss hiring somebody to teach your child a trade on Shabbos. But, says the Mechaber, v'dafke ledaber im roitza lehistaker. The only thing that we're being matir over here is mimtzai chefzecha v'daber davar. What does that mean? We're being matir. You could meet the Rebbe on Shabbos and you could say, would you be interested in working for me and becoming a malamed for my son? Normally, that would be usher because of daber davar. Because you're not allowed to actually hire him on Shabbos. Actually hiring him on Shabbos, that would be conducting business. That would be mekach umemkar, masa umatan on Shabbos. So that would be usher. What are we being matir? The discussion, the daber davar, is what we're being matir. And that's why the Mechaber says, v'dafke ledaber im roitza lehistaker, aval l'sachroi, but to actually hire him, or even olahazkir lo schum mois, or to arrange the salary. Would you like to work for me as a malamed for my son? I'll pay you $350 a week. That you're not allowed to do. That's also because of mekach umemkar. Says the Mishnah Berurah kat lamed oy umnis. Now, why is it a dvar mitzvah? Why is it cheftzei shamayim to hire somebody, to discuss with somebody, taking your son as an apprentice, to talk to a carpenter, take my son as an apprentice, to teach him a trade? Why is that a dvar mitzvah? Says the Mishnah Berurah, duhunami oisik b'mitzvah, that is a mitzvah, the im ein lo umnis oisik b'gezel. Because if somebody doesn't have a trade, if somebody doesn't have a way to earn money, chas v'chalila, when he's stuck, he's going to become a thief. So it's a dvar mitzvah. Indeed, the Gemara in Kedushin says that a father has a chiyuv, he has an obligation to teach his son a trade. The Rosh Zatzal famously, Rav Moshe famously writes that nowadays teaching your son Torah is teaching him a trade. Because since we're matir, making money off of teaching Torah, so he could become a Rebbe, he could become a Rav, he could become a Dayan, he could become a writer, he could become, there's plenty of trades that you could, where somebody could make a living off of Torah. And therefore, teaching Torah, you're being mekayim both the mitzvah of teaching your son Torah and the mitzvah and the chiyuv of teaching him a trade. Ois kat lamed aleph, the Mechaber said it's only the discussion, it's only the daber davar that we're being matir. Aval l'sachroi, but to actually hire him, or the Mechaber said to mention a salary, to name a price, that would be usher. Kanal b'sif gimel b'hagal, like the Ramah told us earlier in Sif Gimel, kedasa yesh oisrim sham, that you're not allowed to set a price. Okay, let's go weiter. Says the Ramah, second line down. Hago. The There are those that say that where the minig is that when somebody has an aliyah, you make him a Mishnah Berurah, v'noider litzdaka oil chazan, and when you make the Mishnah Berurah, you say, ba'avur shehu noisin chai dollar lebeis hakneses, he pledges money to tzedakah, to the shul, or he pledges money to aniyim, oil chazan, or he pledges money to the chazan. The chazan meaning literally the chazan, the cantor. The shul has a chazan that they hired, and sometimes they raise money for the chazan's salary, or for the shamish's salary, or for the gabai's salary, or for the balkaire's salary. They raise money from the monies that come in by the Mishnah Berurah. So people are pledging by the Mishnah Berurah. Are you allowed to do this? So the Ramah brings down this Yesh Oimrim, the Aser b'Shabbos Lifsei Kamayitain, that says that it's Aser to name a price. This Yesh Oimrim would say, it would be Aser to say, I'm pledging $18. But, v'aminik lahakal, the minig is to be makel to hamota lifsek tzedakah, because we learned already mefurish in the mechaber, in the beginning of this sif and sivav, that you're allowed to be poisik tzedakah. You're allowed to pledge money to tzedakah. So pledging money over here is considered pledging money to tzedakah. Let's see an interesting Mishnah Berurah here. Says the Mishnah Berurah is kat lamed beis. The Ramah said that the Yesh Oisrim, which is the Arzarua, he says it's also to say kamo yitain. It's also to name a dollar figure, how much you're giving. It's also to say I'm pledging $18, I'm pledging $180. That's usher. Ela yormar stam, rather he should make a general statement. Emor bavuri Mishnah Berurah. You tell the Gabbai, make a Mishnah Berurah for me. Okay, so the Gabbai is going to make a Mishnah Berurah. Now what? Well, first of all, now that the Gabbai made a Mishnah Berurah for you, it's understood that you're going to make a donation. So okay, so you didn't name the donation. Others say that you could make a general statement, Ba'avursha yitain matana ba'ada beis hakneses, or ba'ada tzedakah. I'm going to give a donation, but you don't name the dollar figure. Having said that, the Ramah said that the minig is to be makel, and the Ramah said, why could you be makel? Dahamoto lives like tzedakah, because we said you're allowed to pledge money to tzedakah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, very nice. You're telling me you're allowed to pledge money to tzedakah, but what if the money is going to the chazan's salary, and what if the chazan is a very well-paid chazan? So he's not an ani. Why is this tzedakah? Let's say it's a real powerhouse chazan who's making $150,000 a year. He's not an ani. So why are you allowed to make a pledge towards his salary on Shabbos? How is that tzedakah? Explains the Mishnah Berurah, V'afilu chazan oshir, even if the chazan is wealthy, since he's making that money for performing the mitzvah of davening for the Amid, havitzarech mitzvah. That pledge is furthering the fact that the chazan will daven for the Amid. And the chazan davening for the Amid is a mitzvah. So this pledge is a tzarech mitzvah. You're right, it's not tzedakah. It's a different mitzvah. It's the mitzvah of having the chazan to daven for the Amid. How about selling the aliyas and selling the kibudim, right? Hag b'Galila, Samarishtan Mall, right? Are you allowed to sell the kibudim, sell the aliyas in shul on Shabbos? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Yesh Oisrin. There are those that say you're not allowed to do this. Why? Because it's very close to Mekach u'Memkar, right? It's a transaction. I'm selling shlishi, and Heshi is buying shlishi for $180. So it sounds like a business transaction to me. So there is a yesh oisrin, but the Mishnah Berurah says v'yesh matirin. There are those that are matirit. Why? What are you selling? There's nothing here. You're selling an aliyah. What's an aliyah? It's an intangible. There's nothing here. What is a business transaction? In a business transaction, the purchaser gives money to the seller takes a physical item, and the ownership of that physical item is transferred from the seller to the purchaser. Over here, there is no tangible item. There's no chayfetz here. It's just an honor. He's going to be called up to the Sefer Torah. So there's no chayfetz hanikneh, and therefore you can't answer this as a business transaction. You can't answer it as mekach u'memkar. And therefore says the Mishnah Berurah, in places where they're noig to be matter selling the aliyas, ein limchais biyadan, you should not object. However, says the Chavetz Chaim. Uknias b'koimos bebeis hakneses, but to purchase a seat in shul for Yomim Neroim, v'chein knias esroigim in hakol, and also to purchase esroigim from the congregation, akar gemar mitzvasan, at the end of Sukkos, shekoinem oisam la'achila oy lahariach. By us, esroigim, we fully expect to go to the esrog dealer and see 500 esrogim, right? And sit there and spending an hour picking out the most beautiful one. Back in the day, there were times that it was a luxury item, that there was one esrog for the kehillah, and everybody was yotze the mitzvah with one esrog. So too, even when there were more esrogim around, the shul owned esrogim. So that people came into daven, they could go take the esrog and be yotze the mitzvah of daled minim. At the end of Yom Tov, they sold those esrogim. Why would they sell them? Well, it's a fruit. You could eat it. You could make jam out of it. Some people make liquor out of it. You could also use it as an air freshener. I take the esrogim when they're finished on Yom Tov, and I put them in a bowl inside the brake front, and the whole interior of the brake front and everything that's in the brake front smells beautiful all year long from the esrogim. So it's a useful item. So the kehillah would sell their esrogim after Yom Tov. So the Mishnah Berurah over here mentions two items: purchasing seats in shul and purchasing the used esrogim after Yom Tov. That, says the Mishnah Berurah, lekulei alma aser, to make those transactions on Shabbos would be aser. So if it's one of the Shabbosos in Elul, and the Shamish wants to get up and make an appeal, people should buy seats for Yom Neroim, and you'll come to, I want the second seat from the left and the third bench, down from the front, and I'll give you $180 for the seat. That you're not allowed to do, because now you're actually purchasing something where there's a tangible item. I don't think it means so much that you're buying the chair, right? They could switch chairs, but you're buying the seat. So there's something there more tangible. Certainly by the esrogim, right? You're actually buying a fruit. So that transaction you're not allowed to make on Shabbos. V'chein, similarly, another chiddush, liknois shofar ay esrig b'yomtiv min hamoicher esrogim aser. Let's say it's Sukkos, and somehow you didn't manage to get an esrog before Yom Tov. You come in the first day Yom Tov, you want to be yotze your mitzvah daraisa of daled minim. You don't have an esrog. Now remember, the first day Yom Tov, you can't even borrow it. I mean, you could borrow it if it's a matana manas lahachzir, but remember, you need lachem. It has to be yours. So you go over to the local esrog dealer on Yom Tov. I want to buy an esrog, right? Are you allowed to buy an esrog? Well, what isser is it? It's mekach umemkar. Mekach umemkar is a d'Rabbanan, right? It's not a d'Oraisa. Making a purchase is not a d'Oraisa. It's a d'Rabbanan. It's exeri mishum koisiv. You might come to writing. So it is a d'Rabbanan. You want to do it b'makam mitzvah. You want to do it to facilitate being yotze the mitzvah of daled minim. That, says the Mishnah Berurah, that's 100% aser. V'chein liknoi shofar hayesrog b'yontiv min hamoicher esrogim aser. He brings it down from the Magen Avram, and the Shulchan Aruch Harav writes the reason it's aser, in the words of the Shulchan Aruch Harav, she'ein doichin shvus gomer mipnei mitzvah saseh. We're not doicha a bona fide d'Rabbanan, a real iser d'Rabbanan of mekach umemkar. That we're not doicha in order to facilitate a mitzvah aseh. The only thing that we've been matir over here is we've been matir the daber davar, and the reason we could be matir daber davar is because of a drasha mimtzoi cheftzecha asurin v'lei cheftzei shamayim. So that we could be aser. We could be matir. I'm sorry, that we could be matir. But to be matir, a real bona fide issa d'Rabbanan of mekach umemkar, in the furtherance of it, of a mitzvah say, even a mitzvah say daraisa, that we cannot do. Chachamim ha'emidu divreim b'makam daraisa b'sheva al taisa. The Chachamim enforced their rabbinic restrictions, right? Because like this, you're going to look and you're going to say, hold it. On one side, I have the need to be Mekayim a mitzvah say daraisa of daled minim, which requires me to purchase an esrog. On the other hand, I have an issa d'Rabbanan that I'm not allowed to perform a business transaction on Shabbos. Why doesn't the need of the daraisa outweigh the issa d'Rabbanan? The answer is Chazal hemidu divrein. They enforced their gezeres even when it comes to a mitzvah say daraisa b'sheva al taisa. They're not telling you to go against an iser daraisa. They're telling you sit fast in your chair and don't be over an iser darabanan in order to facilitate being mekayim a mitzvah say daraisa. But they're not telling you to get up and be over an iser daraisa. That they wouldn't do. But to sit fast in your chair and not act, and then you won't be able to be mekayim a mitzvah say daraisa because of an issur derabanan. In that case, they do enforce the issur derabanan. V'ayel kamam b'simin shin chav gimel siv dalet. V'hinei mekach u'memkar echad b'peh ve'echad b'mesira aser. All forms of mekach u'memkar are aser b'derabanan on Shabbos, whether you're making a transaction by speaking out a transaction or whether you're actually handing an item over, it's all aser. Gzeir shemayavai l'ksiva, and the gzeir is you might come to write something down. Now we come to a very interesting halacha that has very common manifestations nowadays, or ramifications. V'gam also litein matana l'chaveroi. You're not allowed to give a gift. So let's say you are invited to somebody's home for the Shabbos day Suda, and you live in a place where there's an Erev, and you want to bring a beautiful bottle of wine with you and gift it to the hosts. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to give a matana. You're not allowed to give a gift on Shabbos. Or let's say it's your daughter's birthday on Shabbos, and you want to give her a birthday present on Shabbos. You're not allowed to give a gift on Shabbos. You're not allowed to give an anniversary gift to your wife on Shabbos. You're not allowed to give matanas on Shabbos. You know why? Because they're transactions. You're taking something that is yours and you're gifting it to somebody else. So you're transferring ownership from you to somebody else. That's a form, or it's at least close to mekach u'memkar. And therefore you're not allowed to give a matana. Having said that, we're going to see that giving a matana is more lenient than an actual transaction. Let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says. V'gam also litein matana l'chaveroi, to dummy lemekach u'memkar, because it's very similar to a business transaction. Sharei yotzei merishusai, because you're transferring something out of your rishus to somebody else's rishus. Ella. However, the matana mutar kishu litzarich Shabbos v'yomtiv. Matana becomes mutar when it's being done litzarich Shabbos v'yomtiv, for a Shabbos or Yomtiv need. Now, what does that mean? A Shabbos or Yomtiv need. Like we'll learn later in Simin Shin Chav Gimel Siv Zayin. Now, what does it say over there? Over there, the Mechaber brings down an interesting case. Let's say it's Shabbos, and you need a certain keli. You need a salad bowl to mix up your salad. And you don't have a salad bowl. The only salad bowl that you have in the house is a brand new salad bowl that wasn't toiveled. So it needs tefillas kelim. It wasn't toiveled. Are you allowed to toivel it on Shabbos? Well, toiveling a keli on Shabbos is a problem, because toiveling a keli on Shabbos is tikkun moneh. It's like repairing something. How are you repairing it? Well, right now, it's not available for use because it wasn't toiveled. Once you toivel it, it becomes available for use. So that's tikkun moneh. So the Mechaber gives an eitzah. The Mechaber's eitzah is take the keli, take the salad bowl, and gift it to an Eina Yehudi. Give it as a matana to a non-Jew. A non-Jew's keli does not require tefillah. Now, the non-Jew will lend it to you. And now you could use the salad bowl, because since it belongs to a non-Jew, it doesn't require tefillah. Now here you're giving a matana. How are you allowed to give a matana? So says the Mishnah Berurah over there in Shin Chav Gimel, even though giving a matana is aser on Shabbos, over here it's tzoyrich Shabbos. It's a Shabbos need, right? You need it for the Suda's Shabbos. Giving a bottle of wine to your host is not a tzarech Shabbos. That's your own personal tzarech. Yes, it's a Shabbos Suda, but you don't even know that the bottle of wine is going to be opened by the Suda. You're giving it to him not for tzarech Shabbos. You're giving it to him as a karas hatoiv. They invited you for a meal. You're expressing your gratitude and you're giving them a bottle of wine. That's not a tzarech Shabbos. So giving a matana is aser because it's similar to mekach u'memkar. But l'tzarech Shabbos, we're matter giving a matana. Now, are we matter mekach u'memkar l'tzarech Shabbos? No, we're not. We're not matter actual business transactions l'tzarech Shabbos. We're matter matana because matana is not a real business transaction. It's only similar. Now, I find the language of the Aruch HaShulchan over here very, very just beautiful. I wrote it down on the side of my Mishnah Berurah here. I'll read it to you. The Aruch HaShulchan says like this: Uledvar mitzvah uletzarech Shabbos muter matana. For tzarchei mitzvah or for tzarchei Shabbos, a matana is muter. And he says why? Be'emes lo dami matana lemekach u'memkar. Really, a gift is not so similar to mekach u'memkar. Matana lo shayach kol kach mimtzai chefzecha. It's hard to say that giving a gift is mimtzai chefzecha. She'ein zel histaker. In a business transaction, somebody's trying to make money. That's what happens in a business transaction, right? The seller is making money. Element ne'ava. A gift has nothing to do with making money. You're not getting anything in return, really. I mean, yeah, you're expressing your hakaras hatoiv. The reason you're giving the gift is because you're eating the Shabbos Suda there. But this is not a business transaction. He didn't invite you for Shabbos in order to be marviach a bottle of wine. He invited you for Shabbos because he wants your company. You're going because you enjoy eating there. Hakaras hatoiv, you're getting a bottle of wine. But that's not a business transaction, says the Aruch HaShulchan. And then he also says, V'gam shema yichtov lo shaykh b'matana. There's no angle over here that we should aser. Why is mekach u'memkar aser? We said that memkach u'memkar is aser. It's exera because you might come to writing. Now, yes, by business transactions, you need to write records, right? You need to record things. But by presents, you don't need to record presents. So says the Aruch HaShulchan, V'gam shema yichtov lo shaykh b'matana, t'ksiva b'pinkas, the worry that you're going to write something down in a ledger, hu dafka b'nyoni masu matan. That applies to business. It doesn't apply to presents. And that's why by a matana, we could be more makel. Continues the Mishnah Berurah, and the Mishnah Berurah says, V'chein also litein mashkain l'chaveroi. It's also to give somebody an item for collateral, unless you're giving the collateral for tzarchei mitzvah or tzarchei Shabbos. Now, giving something as a collateral also has like a business angle on it, right? What's collateral? Collateral is a guarantee, right? You're giving somebody something to hold as a guarantee that you'll uphold your side of the deal. Now, that's also because, again, it's very close to mekach u'memkar. But l'tzarchei Shabbos, l'tzarchei mitzvah, it's muter. What would be a case of tzarchei Shabbos, tzarchei mitzvah of a collateral? I'll tell you what, you don't have challah. So you want to go to somebody and you want to get challah, but he's selling you the challah. Now you can't purchase the challah on Shabbos, right? And indeed, you can't even really take possession of the challah on Shabbos. But he could give you his challah. Go ahead, use the challah, with the understanding that you're going to pay for it after Shabbos. But you want to give him a guarantee. So you want to give him something to hold on to as a guarantee that you're going to come back after Shabbos to pay. You're not allowed to give him mashkin on Shabbos, unless it's tzarchei mitzvah, tzarchei Shabbos. The kosavai, the lefizem ashanagu litein kelem b'matana l'chasan adoyresh einay nochain. The Magen Avraham brings down, there used to be a minig that the chasen, let's say Shabbos Sheva Brachas, he would give the drasha. And then after he would give the drasha, people would give him gifts. Says the Magen Avraham, to give those gifts on Shabbos is inappropriate. You're giving a matana on Shabbos, and you're not allowed to do that, and you're not really giving the matana l'tzarchei mitzvah, so how are you allowed to give this matana? But sometimes what people would do is, the chassan would give the drasha, and then you would pledge, I'm going to give $180 in honor of the chassan's drasha. That could be mutter. He says the reason it's mutter is because really you could back out. It's not a real obligation. Sometimes I guess people pledged it and they didn't really give it, and I guess it was done with that understanding. And this isn't like a pledge to tzedakah. Once you make a pledge to tzedakah, you're not allowed to back out. But a pledge to as a gift to the chassan, I guess they were able to back out. So it's not really a matana. V'ayin be'el yarabba, and he says, take a look at the el yarabba. I'm not sure why this wouldn't be aser, by the way, because of daber davar. If you're not allowed to give the gift on Shabbos, then you're not allowed to discuss giving the gift on Shabbos, unless it's tzarchei mitzvah. And if it is tzarchei mitzvah, then you're allowed to give the gift. So it's something that needs tzarech yoser iyun over here. Okay, moving along to Sif Zayin, 3 lines down. It is also to measure things on Shabbos. Now, the reason measuring is also on Shabbos, Pashtus, is because of Uvda D'Chayil. We find brought down in the Rishonim 2 different reasons to Asa measuring. One is Uvda D'Chayil. It's a weekday activity. Why do you usually measure things? You measure a room to figure out how much carpet you need. You measure a wall to see if the picture that you want to hang up is going to fit over there. You measure sugar because you want to bake. You measure ingredients because you want to cook. Measuring typically, or you measure because of Mekach Memkar. You're selling something, so you have to measure out the amount that you're selling. So one reason to aser measuring is because it's sort of the D'Chayil. Another reason to aser measuring that's brought down is that it's a Gzeira Mishum Mekach Memkar. It's not Uvda D'Chayil, it's the same Gzeira as Mekach Memkar. Why is Mekach Memkar also b'D'Rabbanan? Because it might come to writing. Measuring also is a form of Mekach Memkar. It's something that you do very often for business purposes, and it also might bring to writing. So we find different reasons why measuring is aser. Having said that, measuring is aser on Shabbos. Says the Mechaber, mutter limdoid b'Shabbos b'dida shal mitzvah. But if it's necessary to measure something for mitzvah purposes on Shabbos, that's mutter. And the Mechaber gives a couple of interesting examples. Kigoin limdoid im yesh b'mikvah arba'im sa. We know that a mikvah, in order to be kosher, needs a certain minimum amount of water. What is that shear? Arba'im sa, 40 sa. So a woman needs the mikvah Friday night. They're not sure if the mikvah has enough water in it. You're allowed to go and take a stick, or whatever it is, and measure the mikvah to see if there's enough water in the mikvah. The limdoid, now he gives us a very fascinating case. The limdoid ezair mishahu chayla. You're allowed to measure the belt of an ill individual, the lilchaish alav k'maisha naigim hanoshim, and then recite some sort of incantation, which is something that the women did, says the Mechaber. That would be mutter deva medida shal mitzvah, because that's also a medida shal mitzvah. Well, what's going on here? If you look in the Torah describes something that they would do for somebody who had a headache. They would take the person's belt, and then they would measure 3 amos 3 times on the belt. I'm not 100% sure what that means. And then they would say some kind of a lachash, and this was a known method to alleviate a headache. So you need to measure the belt. You're measuring the belt. Says the Mishnah Berurah, says the Mechaber, you're allowed to do that. Why? Because it's a medida shal mitzvah. Apparently also you were allowed to do this, and there was no shash over here of any kind of kishuf or anything else. Apparently this was something like, I guess, like a k'meya mumcha or something. This was something that was known as a real remedy. So this is something that you're allowed to do. And you're allowed to do the measuring because it's a medida shal mitzvah. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Lamed Daled. Says the Mishnah Berurah, medida shal mitzvah. V'avagav deloy huter shvus afilu b'maka mitzvah. Now wait a second. I'm telling you that measuring is an Issa D'Rabbanan. Now, we said before, are you matir at Issa D'Rabbanan in a Makkah mitzvah? Are you allowed to buy an esrig, Issa D'Rabbanan of Mekach Memkar, the Makkah mitzvah, because you want to be Mekayim the mitzvah say of Daled Minim? No. So how are we being matir over here measuring, which is an Issa D'Rabbanan, the same way Mekach Memkar is an Issa D'Rabbanan? How are we being matir that in a Makkah mitzvah in order to measure a mikveh, to see if a woman could use the mikveh? How can you do that? So says the Mishnah Berurah, Shani Medida, measuring is different. It's not as strong on Issa D'Rabbanan. This is not what we would call a shvus gomer. This is not a real strong Issa D'Rabbanan. Elamisham dev the uvda d'chayil. The Mishnah Berurah is telling us over here that measuring is aser under the rubric of uvda d'chayil. Uvda d'chayil is a fascinating category of things that are aser. There's uvda d'chayil that's aser because it's something that resembles weekday type activity. It might possibly lead in some way to weekday type activity. It lessens the honor of Shabbos. It's like Zilzal Shabbos, so it goes against Kavod Shabbos. But that's more of a Shvacha type of Issa D'Rabbanan. It's not as clear somehow on Issa D'Rabbanan as the Issa D'Rabbanan, let's say, of Mekach Memkar, Ulahachi Shari b'Makom Mitzvah, and therefore it's Mutter b'Makom Mitzvah. Ois Kat Laminate, you go limdoid, like to measure the mikveh. V'hu adin, says the Mishnah Berurah, the Mutter limdoid, Chor sheyesh b'kaisal ha'mafsik, im yesh b'y pesach tefach lavi atoma me'achedesh ha'meis b'y lecheder ha'samach loy. We know that if there's a corpse in a room, a corpse in a building, it transmits tumas mace through tumas oil. Right? If there's a mace in a building, everything under the same roof as that mace becomes tameh. Now, there are very complex rules to tumas oil. One rule of tumas oil is that if the mace is isolated in one room, the tumah remains in that room, unless there's an opening that goes from that room to another room. But the opening has to have a minimal size. So let's say there's a hole in the wall between the room where the mace is and another room. And you want to know if the tumas mace is going to go through that hole into the next room. Why do you want to know? How does tumas mace really relate to us nowadays? Well, it does. A kohen. If the tumas mace goes into the next room, then the kohen can't be in that room. But if the hole is so small that the tumas mace cannot go through the hole, then the kohen could stay in that room. So you want to measure the hole. You want to see, is the hole a tefach? If it's a tefach, then the kohen's got to get out. If it's less than a tefach, the kohen could stay there. Now that's measuring not so much for mitzvah purposes, but for Torah purposes, for halacha purposes. Measuring for halacha purposes is mutter. Even though really the kohen could get out, let him leave. What do you have to measure for? Since the measuring that you're doing is a Torah measuring, no one's going to look at it and saying you're measuring the hole to see how much sheetrock you need to repair the hole, or how much plaster you need. No, this is Torah. People are tumbling. Is it a tefach? Is it not a tefach? Yeah. Let's say your wife comes with a shaila of basa b'chalav, and you want to know, is there shishim keneged the iser or is there not? You're allowed to measure to know if you have shishim. Since this is neged to psak halacha, lehevi kuvdin dechayil. I'll tell you another very, very pertinent. We're getting to that time of year. You're allowed to measure your matzah to see if you have a kezayis, so that by the seder you know that you're eating enough matzah. You're allowed to measure your kais. You could use a measuring cup to measure your kais for the dalit kaisais to see if it's big enough. You can be mekayim the mitzvah of dalit kaisais. Mitzvah. We said that to do this thing with the belt for the ill individual is also a medida shal mitzvah, the medida refuahi, because this measuring is for refuah, or refuah saguf mitzvah, and refuah saguf, healing, is a mitzvah. Now, you might say, wait a second, hold it. I know there's always a tumul on Shabbos. You're not allowed to do things for refuah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this is not, what's the issur of doing something for refuah? Shchikas samemanim. You might come to grind up medicines, but you're not coming to grind up medications for this type of healing that uses a lachash, that uses an incantation. The only time you have shchikas samemanim is when you're doing a form of refuah that uses herbs, it uses pills, it uses a medication that you take. So, okay, you might come to shchikas samemanim. You're not going to come to shchikas samemanim because you're measuring a belt and you're saying alachash. Okay, we'll stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Baruch Shem should send Yeshua's refuahs panas and sheduchim tolos in need. We should be zeichet to see the B'yeskel Tzedek. B'mher v'yameinu amen. Be well.